Okay, so to finalize this despill, we're gonna clean up a little bit of that green, and potentially this area, if necessary, might be necessary looking at it, but yeah, so let's get into it. So the way I'm going to do this is kind of try to figure out where this is originating rather than just trying to color correct a bit of green out at the end. And I think around the edge despill is kind of where this problem is. So I'm going to create another branch off in the edge despill and just try to fine tune with the despill madness to try to get some of the green out. And I can key mix that back together. And I'll just expand this so that it's clear that these two create the edge despill. And then I'll just roto that around this area and see if that solves our problem. We'll go to the end. And yeah, it looks like it's done a pretty decent job if we enable and disable. So you see it's kind of clearing up all that weird greenness. So that was a pretty quick fix. And we'll just put the track on there as well. So you see just a little fine tune, fix a lot of the problems. Be careful with the roto. You see if it's a little bit too far over, we're getting red in our radar dish thing that's back there. So we'll just kind of fade that off a little bit by hitting E with those points selected. And I'll just fade off the rest of it just in case that there's any other edges. And yeah, that should be good to go. The other thing we can do is we can, we can add our grain onto there as well. So we'll just go on there and add an F regrain. And for this specific example, I'm just going to eyeball this grain instead of like selecting the original grain. As I was trying to play around with that earlier, and Nuke seemed to be having a problem. Not sure if it's my version of Nuke. Something seems to not be working great with the F regrain as it currently stands. I'll just give it a shot here and see. Usually you just have to plug in the source and the grain, but for whatever reason, I don't know if it doesn't like this footage or if there's a potential problem in this version of Nuke 2.1225. But for whatever reason, any grain profile I give it doesn't seem to be working with this. So that's fine. We can just eyeball a very similar grain in this instance. So that's what I'm going to do, is just put a grain on there and take a look. And so if you set the F regrain to preset stock, you can basically just do it that way. And if I hit the red, green, and blue channels, we can kind of eyeball it. So we look at the grain here. So we see, for example, this is the blue channel. And then we look at the grain in our background. And we try to match it. So maybe we want to increase the, if I'm looking at the blue channel, we can increase the blue size a little bit. And maybe decrease the amount very slightly. And if I look at the green channel, we could definitely reduce the amount. If we look at how much is there, and then we look at how much is there, we can just reduce the amount. And then look at the red channel, same thing, we'll probably reduce a little bit. And then we can get a pretty similar grain just by matching it by eye. It's not gonna be the exact movement of the grain, but in our case, it probably doesn't matter as we're not QCing to that level of exact grain. And so we'll move into some more advanced techniques now. We can do what's called additive keying on the hair. So we can actually bring back more detail by using a different technique. And we could probably restore whatever this was. There's like a highlight, which we'll use like a luminance key. We can probably bring it back, or an additive key. So we'll talk about those alternative keying techniques. Those aren't actually technically keying. It's a slightly different process. But this is a pretty good point that we've gotten this to. Maybe I could darken this as well if we find it, a little bit distracting in terms of an integration change. So we could always go here with just a quick roto and just knock that little highlight down and then just blur it. and blur it a little bit more, and then reduce the opacity a little bit so we can just maybe just knock it down a little bit. It's not super bright, whatever that highlight is. We might also want to just paint that out completely if it's distracting. So I think that's a little bit better. It's drawing the eye less. One thing we could do with integration before we jump into the advanced keying as well, maybe we could just darken this edge, because one thing that's not compositionally great about this shot is that we have a very dark background and then like this slightly brighter wall. So this is where we could do a color correction on our footage. So before the pre-multiply, we could put a grade here, and I'll put a radio, set it to no clip, and then I'm going to put the radio in this corner like this, and then we'll just put a slight soft darken, and that's just going to help the eye not be drawn to that area in terms of a very stark contrast of edges. So that's what I'm always paying attention to, and you totally can grade the plate if there's a stark edge being created, and just bring the values closer together, and that will sort of help that problem. The only thing we might need to do is if we're doing that, we might need to add some more grain to this area technically, because darker areas have a little bit more grain. So there's a workflow we could do to adjust the grain, which I can go into after. But that's just a little adjustment. And we'll start talking about some more keying techniques and extra grain things we can do as well.